So into with business once again, after a little bit of a hiatus yesterday for obvious reasons. Portugal moving centre stage in the Eurozone crisis. A general strike gets underway there.
Almost at the time that we've stopped talking about the Eurozone crisis in some ways, Stuart, you could be forgiven for thinking that with the second bailout for Greece pretty much done and dusted, this whole Eurozone crisis is over. But in fact, what it's done really is brought Portugal centre stage, a country we haven't perhaps monitored enough with this Greek crisis dominating the markets and dominating market sentiment, and yet it's always been in the background. Remember, Portugal was the third country to receive a bailout from the EU and the IMF, a country that's now in the deepest recession it's known for 40 years, with the economy set to contract by more than 3% over the course of the next 12 months. Well, this Thursday sees a new general strike by many key public sector workers across Portugal, and our correspondent Sarah Morris is in Lisbon for us.
Portugal's largest union, the CGTP, has called its second general strike under the government of Pedro Passos Coelho. The union managed to get 300,000 people onto the streets recently to protest the reforms, and it's hoping that it can virtually paralyse the country, particularly bringing public transport to a standstill. Tonight already the metro is totally closed. Most of the trains are not expected to run for the next day, and this is what the picketers said to us as we talked to them tonight at Rocio station.
This government's policy is criminal. It's an assault against all the workers of this country, for young people, retired people, for all workers.
We continue to fight so that in the future things will get better. We had a revolution in Portugal after the dictatorship to make sure things changed. But since then, nothing has changed. The government continues to treat us badly.
We will end up with violent clashes like in Greece, if the government continues with their policies. The situation is getting so bad that at some point we will no longer be able to handle it.
With unemployment running at about 14% and the economy expected to shrink by 3% this year, the outlook here in Portugal is looking pretty bleak. Many economists already think that a second bailout plan is inevitable.
That was Sarah Morris reporting from Lisbon. She'll be following that strike throughout the day in Lisbon there. Just to pick up on a few things that she said there, Stuart, of course, it's easy to compare Greece and suggest that it is Portugal is the new Greece. In fact, we had the head of PIMCO, the world's largest bond dealing firm, saying exactly that, that this country has unsustainable borrowing costs. And you can understand why. We've seen bond yields moving up to around 12.5% in the last few days, and yet they have come down a bit in the last month or so. So there's plenty to suggest that maybe Portugal is good for the long term. You can see there those borrowing costs peaking at around 14% in the last couple of months. But with the resolution, or the part resolution of the Greek crisis, things have improved a little bit. And yet those figures still, for many people, are unsustainable. None of these Eurozone countries can continue for long once their bond yields go up much past 7%, as we saw in Greece.
Not as bad as Greece, though, you think, is that right?
Not as bad as Greece. I certainly think so. I think that perhaps some of these analyses have perhaps not taken in the fact that lots of market sentiment now is suggesting that maybe the worst of this Eurozone crisis is over. We've got financial markets performing well, certainly over the last couple of months, and the concerns about Greece have eased off with that bailout being wrapped up, that second one. The problem with Portugal is a historic one. It's had anemic growth over the last 10 years. When you compare Portugal, for example, with a country like Poland, which at one point during the last decade had growth of 6%, Portugal was flatlining along with just about 1% growth. That is barely nothing at all in real terms. The one good thing that this country does have going for it is it's basically been getting some good ticks from the IMF. In its latest report, it says that Portugal is meeting those austerity targets, that 78 billion euro bailout. The problem is it's only going to get any kind of growth in 2015, which is years away. And of course, now we see people out on the streets in Portugal saying enough is enough. We've taken enough austerity already. We've seen a familiar pattern in Greece.
So there you go, a reminder for you, the Eurozone crisis still with us, even if it has dropped out of the headlines a little bit anyway. What about the markets? How are they taking all this?
Well, the Asian market's perhaps a little bit more preoccupied with Japan's growth, and indeed, against all expectations, we've seen the Japanese government recording a trade surplus of some 32 billion yen for February. Now, the smart money said that Japan would once again record a big trade deficit as it did in January, but that hasn't proved to be the case. Exports are still down nearly 3%, but most feared it would be at least double that. So some reasonably good news, and you can see during late trading in Japan, it means the Nikkei took a little bit of a swing into positive territory.
Right, we're going to pick up now on one or two of the day's other business news stories, starting in the UK, in fact, where the government has come under fire in its latest budget. The coalition government unveiled what it called a business-friendly budget. It's cut the top rate of tax for the highest earners, while providing billions in cheap loans for small firms. It's also bringing borrowing down by £1 billion in a bid to keep the UK's AAA credit rating. But tax officials say removing tax allowances for pensioners will leave more than 4 million people more than £80 a year worse off.
And it's emerged that Deutsche Bank has changed its US operations to beat new financial responsibility laws. The German company has made its Deutsche Bank Trust its main US holding instead of Tarnas Corporation. It means in the event of a cash shortfall, Deutsche can use funds from its base in Frankfurt, alleviating the need to keep large deposits with Tarnas under the terms of the new Frank-Dodd legislation.
Now, just 2 months after receiving an $18 billion bill for polluting the Amazon rainforest in Ecuador, Chevron is in trouble again in South America. Prosecutors have charged the US oil giant and its contractor Transocean over an oil spill in Brazil earlier this year. It could end with lengthy jail terms for some of its top executives.
Chevron recognizes there was a spill, but says it wasn't as bad as Brazilian authorities say. Last November, up to 3,000 barrels of oil spilled from a well Chevron operates off Rio de Janeiro. It was one of several incidents. The company is facing an $11 billion civil lawsuit for the spill. On Wednesday, Brazilian prosecutors filed criminal charges against the oil giant. Brazil says the company operates its wells carelessly. The state is considering barring Chevron from Brazil until it improves its methods.
The companies that come here to Brazil and the ones that are already here must know that safety protocols exist to be fulfilled. All of the companies with no exception, in this case, there are no exceptions.
Transocean, owner of the largest oil rig fleet, is also charged with crime. It was previously involved in the 2010 BP oil disaster in the Gulf of Mexico. That disaster was 1,000 times bigger than Chevron's spill in Brazil.
Okay.
And we're talking Twitter now, aren't we? Lots of birthday messages out there, in fact. We've picked out a few for you. Here's the founder, Jack Dorsey. It's 12:50. Happy 6th birthday at Twitter. From one tweet to over 1 billion every 3 days. I'm so proud of our users and our team. 6th birthday for Twitter.
6th birthday for Twitter, can you believe it? Way back in 2006, I think he just put out a very simple message saying, I am on Twitter, or words to that effect. And as we know the story now of Twitter, huge growth in the last few years. A couple more tweets for you as well from one or two key tweeters. Rupert Murdoch, the founder of News Corp. He came pretty late to the Twitter party. In fact, he only opened up an account in the last couple of months. He's already got more than 200,000 followers. He says here, happy birthday, Twitter. Remarkable company that's helped change the news business and the world.
And another one, a bit of dual social networking here from Connor Lynn, who says, but it can't be Twitter's birthday. Facebook didn't give me a notification.
Yeah, that's a bit
sneaky.
It's a little bit disloyal. Of course, there's lots of questions. We were talking a little earlier, Stuart, about what Twitter can do, how it can evolve. As I say, we know the story there of Twitter. Its evolution has been absolutely immense. It's revolutionised certainly the way you and I work, and many people across the media industry. Obviously had key moments in terms of the Egyptian and Tunisian revolutions. The question now, though, is that with such big growth, can it actually make any money? The forecasts are that it'll make around $1 billion in revenue over the next few years. But whether that will translate into anybody actually wanting to buy this company, or whether it can float, is one that we'll have to watch.
OK, Owen, thanks very much. That's Owen with the business. Just to bring you up to date with the French Interior Minister, Claude Guéant, has been speaking in the last few minutes. He said that the French shooter has said that he wanted to die with weapons in his hand. That's a quote apparently from the French suspect there, according to Claude Guéant. Claude Guéant also went on to say there's been no contact with him throughout the night. So that's siege continuing. Latest coming up after the break.